Hello, I'm Manawiltos, and today we're going to be looking at an article that I found at a website called enkivillage.com, and it's 10 Greatest Conquerors in History. So I think this will be interesting, so let's get started. Now, the reason I'm actually looking at this article is because there are some parts of it where I think it's actually historically questionable, in the sense where I think historical consensus definitely goes the other way from what this article is saying. But let's take a look at this opening paragraph. If you want to see the full article in itself, you can actually go to the website and look at it. But I'm just going to be looking at this opening paragraph. It says, "Throughout history, there have been many men who would be considered conquerors in the sense that each of these men was powerful and made a significant impact during the years they were in control. These men were murderers and thieves, and they were able to lead others to become murderers and thieves. They were smart and excellent at planning and strategizing. These men were directly and indirectly responsible for the deaths of millions of people. And as their power grew, so did the amount of land they controlled. Here is a list of the 10 greatest conquerors in history." All right, so of course we can see that there is a slight angle to this, and that is that the 10 greatest conquerors in history are obviously murderers and thieves. So we're going to be seeing lots of murderers and thieves here. So that's what we're getting out of this. So let's move on to number one. So number one, top of the list, is Attila the Hun. Okay, I can agree. Murderer and thief, sure, fair enough. Okay. Living years, I'm not going to fact check that because, well, it's pretty easy to fact check, but let's actually look at something in here. Okay, it says, location of occupied territory, Roman Empire. So this implies something that might not be, of course, explicitly said, but what it implies is that he occupied parts of a Roman Empire, which is true. However, I think it's also important to note that the majority of his empire was actually outside of the Roman Empire. I'm just saying that what the article writer here has made is an implication that is actually excluding something that's also very important, that Attila the Hun actually ruled large parts of Eastern Europe that were outside of the Roman Empire, and that his empire was actually centered outside of the Roman Empire. But let's continue. Attila and his brother shared the role of king of the Hun Empire when their uncle King Roas died. And yes, Roas is an acceptable spelling of Rugila, as it has been rendered in other terms. Because, it's ancient times. People remember the names in different languages, and as such, names change. Okay. In order to gain sole power, Attila arranged to have his brother murdered. His goal was to gather his subjects in order to create a feared, formidable Asian army to take down the Roman Empire, who referred to him as the Scourge of God. Now, I don't actually know whether they referred to him as the Scourge of God within his own lifetime. I don't really know. And it wasn't so much that the Romans referred to him as much as some of the Christians referred to him as that. Not that it is mutually exclusive, but I think it is definitely important to make that distinction. Because there are Romans who are Christians and Christians who are Romans, but there are also Romans who are not Christians and Christians who are not Romans. Just saying that. Okay. Asian army. Now, this is something that's actually highly disputed. We don't actually know how much of the Huns are actually descended from Asiatic peoples. They may or may not have been. That is something that is still of debate. So I wouldn't really say formidable Asian army, but create a feared and formidable army to take down the Roman Empire. I wouldn't say that it's 100% Asian, though. That's just something that's the historical record is not entirely clear on. There's some debate. I don't know exactly how much debate, but I do know that there is some on this because I do study history a lot. That's what I do in my spare time, I read history. Okay. Under his leadership, his barbaric army devastated the Roman Empire and dominated Europe. Attila the Hun and his tribe were ultimately defeated by the Romans and Visigoths, after which, without a leader, his empire fell apart. Okay, now this is actually saying something that is highly disputable. Well, not actually disputable, never mind, but something that I highly dispute. And that is the implications of that last sentence. Without a leader, his empire fell apart. Well, his empire did have leaders even after he died. And also, Attila the Hun and his tribe were ultimately defeated by the Romans and Visigoths, after which, without a leader, his empire fell apart. That implies that Attila died when they were defeated by the Romans and Visigoths, which obviously refers to the Battle of Catalonian Plains, in which the Roman general Aetius, as well with his Germanic allies, defeated the Visigoths, not the Visigoths, the Huns and their Germanic allies. Because the Huns, their army wasn't entirely composed of Huns, which actually goes back to when it says formidable Asian army, because a lot of the people that joined the Huns in their invasions were actually Germans who were conquered by the Huns or were in an alliance with the Huns or vassalized to the Huns. In some form, they were affiliated with the Huns, and as such, they marched with them when the Huns decided to invade various areas. So the implication here that Attila died at the Battle of Catalonian Plains is absolutely wrong. Attila actually did live for a while after that, and he died at a celebration later on. And his empire did have leaders afterwards, and his empire eventually collapsed and was replaced by the kingdom of the Gepids, who were another Germanic confederacy. So ethnically, the Huns themselves were not Germanic. Now, the question of whether or not they were Asian, that's still in debate, but there are some things that are definitely wrong with this paragraph that may have not been fact-checked to at least my satisfaction. But of course, some people might find this okay. I personally think it's important to at least try to find at least some accuracy in there. Okay, so let's move on to the next article. Okay, we're skipping to number 6. The other ones didn't really have much to say about them, so we're skipping those. Okay, number 6, William the Conqueror. Location of occupied territory, England, Scotland, Wales. William the Conqueror was the illegitimate son of Robert, Duke of Normandy, and was therefore also referred to as William the Bastard. When his father died, William took his father's title, but many of his subjects would not accept an illegitimate heir as king. Wait. Whoa. Let's stop right there. He was the son of the Duke of Normandy, and therefore, if he took his father's title, that would make him Duke, not King, which is very different. It's important to make the distinction. And an assassination attempt was made on his life. Edward, King of England, was a distant cousin of William's and promised William that he would be his successor. Now, this is not entirely sure. Some say that it may have happened, some say that it may not. We don't know for sure whether this happened because we don't really have documentation on this, but this definitely was William's claim to the throne, that he was chosen as the successor by Edward. Okay. When Harold, Earl of Wessex, was crowned after Edward's death, William invaded England, killed his opponent, and took over as king. William successfully conquered Scotland and Wales during his reign. Okay, so if any of you are from Scotland or from Wales and you're into history, you may notice that there might be something wrong about this. Okay, so let's be a bit accurate on this. Okay, Wales. Wales was ruled by a number of different principalities during this time. Now, William did, in fact, push a little bit on the border of Wales, but he definitely did not conquer Wales. That is something that is for sure, and we have a historical record, and not just on William's side on England, but also on the various people that ruled Wales during this time, the various princes and kings in the various kingdoms and principalities of Wales, which at this time was not entirely united yet. It wouldn't be really united until about a century later, and then it would then be conquered afterwards. But at this time, it was not united. Now, Scotland was under the rule of, I believe, King Malcolm III, and it definitely wasn't conquered. Of course, Malcolm III did make several. He had several conflicts with England, but he wasn't actually conquered. Scotland wouldn't really be fully invaded by England until maybe the time of the Plantagenets, but it wasn't actually conquered fully. It was fully invaded, I think, but never actually fully conquered, which there's a difference to make. For example, Edward Longshanks, there was a lot of resistance against him, and he was eventually pushed back, and Robert Bruce became King of Scotland. Okay, so enough on that. Let's move on to the next subject. Okay, next up we have Genghis Khan. Okay. Location of occupied territory: China and parts of Russia, Turkey, and Persia. We're going to get back to that in just a moment. Okay, Genghis Khan, one of the greatest conquerors in history, was born in Mongolia to a father who was a leader of a small tribe. The new leader threw Genghis Khan, then known as Temujin, and the rest of his family out of the tribe. Now, it's important to know that this new leader is not the same as his father, just to make that distinction. The article just sort of skips a little bit, or maybe isn't entirely clear on that, but let me just clarify that, just in case for anybody who didn't already know that. Okay. He began to organize a number of smaller tribes into one large one, and then proceeded to go from one village to the next and conquer non-Mongolian tribes. As his powerful army grew, he took over not only parts of China, but also areas in Russia, Turkey, and Middle Eastern Persia. The number of people he killed is unmatched by any other conqueror, and the land his overtook was 4 times larger than conquered by Alexander the Great. Okay, now, let's get to something that's a bit off about this article, and that is the actual accounts of what Genghis Khan had conquered. Because Genghis Khan's conquests, let's be honest here, did not reach as far as Turkey. So let me just get up a map real quick. Okay, this is a map of the areas conquered by Genghis Khan, superimposed with modern borders superimposed on it. So if we look at it, we see, yes, he did conquer parts of Russia. Not really parts that at that time were considered to be part of Russia. He conquered areas which were inhabited by Turkic people, but not actually modern-day Turkey. That's important to note. Parts of China, yes, that is correct. And Persia, let's slow down on there, because you might say, well, Iran is the same as Persia, and therefore that northern bit of Iran really counts. And I'm thinking, no, it doesn't really. He conquered the Khwarezm, or Khwarezmia, which the Empire of Khwarezm. I think there's another name for it, but it doesn't come to my mind right now. Khwarezm is an area that you can see. It's in that area of Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, and it's a fertile area in that region, and that's an area that he conquered, and it had an empire that included parts of Persia, and that is as far as he conquered. But what the article writer certainly is mistaking before the actual conquest of Genghis Khan is a much larger area that was actually conquered by his descendants and relatives, that includes all of China and Persia and goes much farther into Russia. And this is actually a common mistake I've seen online, where people look at Genghis Khan's conquests and actually conflate those with the conquests of his descendants. And it's important to make the distinction, because we're talking about individuals here. We're talking about Genghis Khan himself, and not his successors when we say Genghis Khan. Okay, now we move on to Napoleon Bonaparte, or Napoleone Bonaparte if you're Italian. Okay, living years 1769, 1821. I'm not really going to confirm that, but let's move on. It's important to actually look at those dates, because they're going to be important in just a minute. As a young man, Napoleon attended military school, leaving early when his father passed away, and quickly became a leader in the French Revolution, eventually acquiring the rank of commander. After conquering Egypt, which he did, he conquered it. The conquest didn't last very long, though, only a few years before the British and the Ottomans took it back. He worked on centralizing the French government, establishing laws, and reestablishing the Catholic religion, which did happen. The Catholic religion, and in fact religion in general, was rejected at some point by the French Revolution. They went for this atheist government, and they actually tried to get rid of weeks, in the sense of, 7-day week. They tried to get rid of that, which is interesting, actually. An interesting part of French history, but let's not get too off track here. When Britain, Russia, and Austria declared war on France, Napoleon defeated them and gained power over a number of territories in Europe, thus making him one of the greatest conquerors in history. Fair enough. Napoleon then strategically placed trusted family and followers as leaders across the nation after he successfully dissolved the Roman Empire. And some of you might be confused by the term the Roman Empire, and that's actually talking about the Holy Roman Empire, which, yes, technically it is called the Roman Empire. Okay, Napoleon unsuccessfully invaded Russia in 1892, which led up to the Battle of Waterloo. The historic battle ended in Napoleon's capture and eventually his death. This last sentence is what makes this entire paragraph wrong, because this last sentence has a lot of mistakes in it. Okay. Napoleon unsuccessfully invaded Russia in 1892. Now the question is, when did Napoleon die? According to this article earlier, it says 1821. But you're saying that he invaded a land many years after his supposed death, which I personally find to be a bit absurd, if you ask me. I mean, Napoleon, he didn't really live long, because living that long would make him a centenarian, which is very rare, especially in those days. And yeah, that's just something that's a bit wrong about this. Also, the Battle of Waterloo. Okay, what else it's saying is, what it is also saying, sorry for my misgrammarization, is Napoleon unsuccessfully invaded Russia, which led to the Battle of Waterloo. Napoleon's campaign in Russia did not lead to the Battle of Waterloo, because the Battle of Waterloo was, in fact, during the 100 Days, which happened after Napoleon had returned from exile on the island of Elba, which is in the Tyrrhenian Sea, next to Italy, in fact next to Corsica, which is Napoleon's homeland. He had gotten off the island of Elba, and this happened after the Russian campaign. So the Russian campaign, in fact, did not directly lead to the Battle of Waterloo, because Napoleon had actually lost power and then regained power afterwards. So it's an entirely, completely different war that this happened. So it's important not to combine two things that were technically completely different. the historical battle ended in Napoleon's capture and eventually his death. This is also incorrect. Napoleon was not captured at Waterloo. In fact, Napoleon spent many days entirely free before actually finally surrendering at Ile d'Aix. I believe that's the correct pronunciation. I might actually be pronouncing it wrong, which, sure, you can... It's fine. French is not my native language, and it's also not a language that I've studied intensively, so I am entirely okay with having pronounced that wrong. Just know that I at least tried. And it's an island that is on the coast of France at the Bay of Biscay, which is in fact on the entire opposite end of France from Waterloo. So this is just incorrect. Okay, let's move on from here then. Let us continue. And we couldn't round this out without leaving in Adolf Hitler. All right. Okay, living years 1889, 1945. I think that's correct. I don't know exactly when he was born, so I won't really fact check that because that's not really the important part about this. What's important is the paragraph that follows. Location of occupied territory, Europe and Africa. That is entirely correct. Born in Austria, Hitler was a German politician who became leader of a Nazi party during World War II. That is correct. He actually became leader many years before World War II, but I think I know the gist. I know what the article writer is saying. Okay. Hitler was very charismatic and often spoke of communism and capitalism being conspiracies developed by Jews. Now, I don't know whether he was saying that they were conspiracies developed by Jews, but I know that he certainly did blame the Jews for a lot of the things that happened, and he certainly did disapprove of communism and capitalism, which were opposed to his own style of Nazism, which was a different kind of socialism from communism because it's more nationalized. And there's a number of other different things that the Nazis did that were different from the Soviets. Okay, Hitler became Chancellor of Germany in 1933 and developed the Third Reich, which means Third Realm. A dictatorship directed at eliminating the Jewish population. Okay, now I don't know whether they were exactly directed at eliminating the Jewish population. Now, of course, this was definitely one of the goals of many of the Nazis, but I don't think that he developed that for the primary reason of eliminating the Jews. I think it was more developed at making... He was more saying, make Germany great again. I think that was the point of why he called it that, and also why he made it. It's because he wanted Germany to become a great power. And eliminating the Jews was just part of what they did. It wasn't their primary goal, I think. It's important to know exactly what they were really going for. Okay. I'm not saying that this justifies their elimination of many of the Jews. This does not at all justify that, okay? I'm just saying that that is not their primary purpose in this. Because of a fast-paced economic recovery after the Great Depression, Hitler was given extensive support by his followers. Now, as far as I know, the Great Depression was even worse in Germany than it was in the United States. The United States got really well off in the Great Depression because the United States didn't really have to recover after World War I as much as some of the other countries did, because other countries were a lot more were affected a lot harder by World War I, so they also had a lot of trouble during the Great Depression. But Germany was really ruined after World War I. Their economy was in shambles, and the regime that they had afterwards, in fact, made many things worse with hyperinflation and stuff like that. So this government-controlled economy helped balance things out. Now, of course, I wouldn't say that it was the best plan for growth, of course, because it simply wasn't. And it also relied on taking money from minorities such as the Jews in order to keep stuff going in there. They had to rob others. Okay. After declaring war on Poland, Britain and France attacked Germany, resulting in World War II. Fair enough. I think that's a fine way to summarize that. Of course, Poland was also attacked by the Soviet Union, so technically it was a mix of a number of different things that led to World War II. But let's continue. By the end of the war, Hitler's army had overtaken most of North Africa and Europe. That's not entirely true. By the end of the war, the other forces of the Soviets and the British, and also the Americans and French as well, let's not forget about those, had overtaken most of Italy, Germany, and Japan. When the US joined in to help the Soviets, Hitler committed suicide. Now, this is inaccurate entirely, I just have to say, because by the end of the war, of course, by the time Hitler died, which I believe is by the end of a war, I'm just saying that the writer isn't really distinguishing these things as much as the writer should, because it makes it imply that Hitler died when his empire was at a height, and then the US went in, and that made Hitler die. No. Hitler probably would have fallen without the US's help. The US did help expedite that a little bit. But we do know that they would have fallen anyway, because if you look at casualties, you can tell that most German casualties were at the Eastern Front. So they were getting pushed heavily by the Soviets, and Hitler didn't commit suicide when the US joined. He actually committed suicide much after that. In fact, he committed suicide when the very last bits of the German army were on the verge of collapse, because Berlin itself was at risk at this point, and many German cities had already been ruined. So I wouldn't say he's the greatest conqueror, because I personally would say that conquest is more something is more occupied rather than conquered. What I'm saying is, things are conquered when by the time you're done, you keep them. You keep conquests. Occupations are temporary. That's just my my dichotomy on that. You might disagree, but anyway, if you like the video, please do comment and subscribe. Look in the links in the description below on a number of different things. And any last words I have on this video, I'm going to give it a pass on whether or not it was the article, that is, whether or not it is ranked or not, because it is written from 1 to 10 rather than 10 to 1, which makes it appear as though it may or may not be ranked. So I'm going to give it a pass on whether these rankings would be good. Overall, I think most of the people that were on the list, however, were deserving to be on there. I think William the Conqueror might be a bit small scale for such large scale peers such as Alexander and Attila the Hun, but I guess to each their own, I suppose. So that's all I've got to say for now. Thank you all for watching. Anawiltus over and out.